I'm Kirk Hanson. We're here at the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics at Santa Clara University. And we have two guests today. Hank Shea, a professor from the University of St. Thomas Law School in Minneapolis, and Mark Faris, a business executive who is a convicted felon for a fraud that he was engaged in. What we're going to talk about is white-collar crime and how it's being prosecuted. Now, Mark, as you look at your own experience and others, what are the common elements of frauds that people get drawn into, like you got drawn into? What, reflecting on your own experience, are there things that you would worry the students or others might get drawn into? What are the characteristics of what happened to you that others ought to watch out for?
This is a question I can address very quickly. I mean, I am reflecting on my own experience. Greed, arrogance, ambition, and rationalizing and justifying actions related to those are a very dangerous combination. Quite frankly, there is no place for that in the business world. Outside of the business world, I don't believe there's any place for those. And as I have learned in my own life going through this experience, that grace and humility certainly are far more important and applicable in our day-to-day lives. And I also think that it's important to understand that you can't put yourself first. And when I say that, I'm saying I can't put myself in front of my family, my faith, my friends, the things that matter, and I did that.
But don't we expect business people and lawyers going into practice to be aggressive, to take risks, to go for it in careers? Where's the line between that and what you experienced and led you to the fraud that you were engaged in?
Well, I've thought about this, and maybe the question to be asked is capitalism in general, is capitalism on one side of the spectrum, and the things that we need to do in terms of our values, our morals, our principles, are they actually in conflict with each other? And maybe to some degree they are. I certainly, in America, we're allowed to pursue our dreams, our career ambitions, and I think that's a good thing. But you have to go about things the right way.
Well, what message
is his experience typical of
it
the
is.
100 or so you prosecuted?
The hundreds, and it is typical, Kirk. And I would say that ambition is not a bad thing, but when it clouds judgment, when it overtakes your sense of right and wrong and has you take your values and place them in the back seat, then that becomes a dangerous situation for anybody. Risk-taking is not a bad thing, as long as it's calculated. As long as the risks that you take are ones that you'd be willing to share with others, not shrouded in secrecy, not shrouded in a belief, I hope nobody finds out about this chance that I'm taking. But if there's transparency in risk-taking, that's a good thing. Ego, we all have ego. We all have pride, but when pride overtakes conscience, and when pride becomes the driver of whether you're willing to admit having done something wrong, we all mess up. It's hard to admit that, but it's always the best course. That's what we try and do through our presentations, is to communicate those lessons to students that they can use throughout their lives.
Mark, in the conversation here, you said that the trigger for you that brought the rationalization on was that you were just mad at the company that you were in partnership with, that you felt they'd been mistreating your small company, and that that escalated into what was a fraud against them. How did that work in your mind? Was it just anger, sense that you'd been wronged, and therefore this was just payback?
Both. I think, though, it's important to let anyone that's watching this understand, though, that the underlying factors were the greed, the arrogance, the ambition. Those were certainly the driving forces. In my example of a company that I believe, a large company that certainly hurt our business. I did sort of wage my own personal war. I had a high level of anger and resentment, and hit back at them. Which, and maybe one of the lessons here is you can't take things into your own hands and be making independent decisions about what you think is right. It's always about, other people, stakeholders, employees, shareholders, the community, suppliers, customers. So the conversation is always bigger than your own sphere. And unfortunately, those that get into a fraudulent situation have a very narrow scope and understanding of what they think they're doing.
I read a parallel to your situation the other day, which was about young people who did shoplifting. And they said, oh, well, I got ripped off by this business in another transaction, or I had a product that broke or something, and they wouldn't make it right, and therefore I felt justified in shoplifting. And in some ways, that's the kind of thinking that you went through. We got very badly treated by this organization, and then that became your rationale.
It was.
Yeah.
To a large degree. Yeah.
Last question is really how organizations as a whole can bring about a more ethical culture internally, how it can create an environment where you'll think twice, you would think twice the next time. What could the company do? What would help create an ethical culture that might make you resist what you did in this instance?
I think there are a lot of organizations that are doing the right things. Mission statements, code of conducts, employee handbooks, hotlines, supporting whistleblowing are important steps. But we need to get beyond the words, and that calls for training, and that calls for good leadership. You can't have enough training at the individual level. This idea of awareness, and that starts with quality leadership. A friend of mine who I often refer to, that has spent 25 years in the corporate world and has also been a colonel in the reserve, talks to me many times about his ideas of leadership. And what he says is, the key to good leadership, the most important step, is to treat people and care about them. Treat them in a decent way and care about them. Once you do that, then you can create a culture of trust and concern for each other. And once that's done, then you're in a position to promote good ethical behavior and accountability and responsibility. There are parallels and lessons from the military to the business world, but clearly it calls for better leadership and training. You cannot train enough.
In dealing with white-collar crime, what are the things you think companies might have been doing that would have prevented many of the cases
Kirk,
you prosecuted?
let me give you an example of a company where I recently attended an event. It was corporate-wide. It was broadcast around the world for all employees. This is about 25,000 employees for a major multinational corporation, and the CEO got up just before I did, and he said two things that really impressed me. The first is, he said, we've been giving business performance awards here since the company was started, and we're going to continue to do that. But this year we're going to introduce a new award. We're going to call it an Ethics Champion Award. And he announced then 3 persons in the company who had come to his attention in the prior year who had made the right ethical choice in difficult situations. And he put their names up on the board and broadcast around the world to every employee, this is what we not only salute, but we ask others to do. Any company can do that. It didn't even cost a lot of money, but the message that sends is more powerful and I think more relevant for people working out in the company's trenches than almost anything you could do with online training or the like. The second thing he said at the end of his talk was, this is about ethics. This company stands for ethics. I want every employee to know that if you have an ethical concern of any type, you bring it to your supervisor or supervisors. And I say to you today, if your concern is not adequately addressed by your supervisors, I want you to email or call me. That's walking the ethics talk. That's how you create a culture where people can feel that it's not just something that is required of them, but it's the right thing and the best thing to do.
And it recognizes that things may get clogged up in the middle, and some individual may engage in a rationalization at an upper level. Thank you both for being with us today.